My husband's best friend's son is getting touchy-feely with my daughter, and that wouldn't be a problem, but I think my husband is his father. So, I don't know how to prevent them from going full-on Alabama. This began as a dark, intrusive thought that I could never shake off. And over the years, it has bloomed into a poisonous flower that infects my entire psyche. I, 42F, am married to my husband, David, 43M, and he has a female best friend, Jessica, 43F. I met David in university, but he's known Jessica since they were about 7. They do everything together and understand each other implicitly. They've always insisted that they are surrogate siblings. Naturally, I, as a new girlfriend, felt a little threatened by Jessica and her closeness to David, but they both reassured me I had nothing to worry about, that their bond was not romantic and had never been intimate, that Jessica really was just the sister David never had. I believed them, and it didn't take long for me to forget any insecurity I had about Jessica. She became my friend too. She officiated our wedding. David and I have built a wonderful life together, and we've always had a strong relationship. After we got married and moved in together, we still saw a lot of Jessica, and I was fine with that. I've spent many nights on the town trying to help Jessica find a man, as she has always lamented how unlucky she is in love. David and I started having children after we were married, and around the same time, so did Jessica. For further context, my children are Chloe 15, Ethan 12, Hannah 10, and Liam 6. Jessica's children are Noah 17, Emily 14, and the twins Ben and Grace 9. Now, Jessica was not in a relationship at this point. She was not married. As far as I knew, she was dating but not consistently. As David and I had more kids and our family grew, periodically Jessica would find herself pregnant as well. This happened a few times, and David and I never knew anything about the father or fathers in question. I kind of assumed that maybe Jessica was sleeping around and not keeping in contact with her one-night stands. David agreed this was probably the answer. While I did ask each time if Jessica knew the paternity, she always said no, and she didn't seem that worried about the idea of raising kids on her own, so I didn't press her. Of course, she had us to support her, so there was that. While Jessica never asked for any help, David was never going to let his best friend struggle to stay afloat when she had children to raise. Financially, we are very fortunate and privileged. I have a job that pays handsomely, and David also had wealthy parents who already knew and loved Jessica, so they were happy to provide for her. My in-laws defy stereotypes. They are the kindest and gentlest people, so we were able to support Jessica, get her somewhere to stay with her kids. People might be tempted to call her a leech, but I never saw it that way. None of us did. She needed help, and we could provide it. I also know people are going to criticize her for her lack of responsibility and question why she never used more reliable birth control. Honestly, that's a long story I don't want to get into because even I don't fully understand her reasoning, but it was quite important to her that she never be on birth control and that whatever came of that choice, she would accept it. It wasn't religiously motivated, I know that, but it held that degree of significance to Jessica. She really did not want to take birth control. She's explained it to me more than once, but I'm still not clear on why. Of course, with Jessica being David's best friend since they were kids, it's not unreasonable that they sometimes hang out together when I'm not there. Hey, that's fine. Sometimes I hang out with Jessica one-on-one as well, though David does it more often. After all, she was his friend first. This included him going over to where she was staying and, at times, sleeping over. Was I a fool to trust him and believe nothing was going on? Perhaps, but for years they presented themselves as buddies, like siblings. I never picked up on any vibes between them, not ever. As one might expect, our children were brought up together. Not in the same house. Our home is decently sized, but even we don't have room for 8 kids. But we made sure Jessica's children met ours from a young age, and they always got along. Strong bonds of friendship have formed over the years, which is good, especially if I'm right and they share blood. I've been dawdling, getting to the main point. Yes, I have come to suspect that David fathered at least one of Jessica's kids, if not all of them. Frankly, I do suspect they are all his. I would never have believed my husband to be capable of such a thing, and he's given me no indication that he is the unfaithful sort. But he does spend a lot of time with Jessica, and I have to confess, I cannot remember ever seeing her with a real boyfriend over the years. She would talk to men at bars and parties. I would try to be her wingman and so on, but nothing ever seemed to really happen. So when she got pregnant the first time, I was curious. When it happened again and again, I began to wonder if she had some sort of secret beau she didn't want us to know about for whatever reason. But I couldn't think of any reason why she would hide him, especially from her children. After Liam, our youngest, was born, David, and I agreed that the time had come for him to have a vasectomy. Jessica's twins had arrived just a couple of years prior. Of course, after the procedure, David and I continued to make love, but I no longer had to think about pregnancy. Meanwhile, Jessica never got pregnant again after the twins. Is it a coincidence that David had a vasectomy, and then both of us stopped getting pregnant? I don't know, but David would still visit her, and he wasn't just going to see her, but checking up on her children as well. In general, I should have paid more attention to it sooner, but David has always acted like a father to them, especially as they've gotten older. He's the father they never had. He doesn't neglect me or our children, not one bit. He's doing double duty. On its own, the idea that he is a surrogate father to Jessica's fatherless children isn't inherently suspicious. One could even call it noble. But it combines with a lot of other little things. There is appearance as well. I won't go into specifics of hair color, eye color, or unique physical traits, because I'd rather limit the identifying factors of the people involved and keep this whole thing as vague as possible. But suffice it to say, Jessica's children, they certainly look like they could be David's. Emily has a very unusual allergy that David also has. The twins look very much like him, Ben in particular. The older Noah gets, the more I see David in his face and personality. While their race doesn't matter, the reality is that David is a different race than Jessica, and Jessica's children look pretty biracial. I could easily believe their father is the same race as David. That doesn't mean David has to be the father, but it sure seems like it. I have never voiced my anxieties to either Jessica or David. I don't want to be the bad guy, and guilty or innocent, I already know they would flatly deny my accusations and be hurt by them. Imagine if that drama reached the ears of my kids or Jessica's kids. Either way, David continues to spend time with Jessica and her children, just as her children spend time with mine. I've hinted to David that I feel needy for more attention and wish he wouldn't give as much to Jessica, but he either missed my cues or pretended to miss them. I don't want to push the idea that he's favoring her because it's not even really true. He's never neglected me for her. I just can't shake the feeling that David and Jessica have been intimate before, likely numerous times. As far as I know, Jessica never really wanted to be a mother either. She wasn't opposed to it, and when each of her children came into the world, she instantly fell in love with them. But motherhood was never really a major part of her life plan or identity in the grand scheme of things. When we would talk about the future, she would sometimes mention a husband and children, but it never seemed like something she had her heart particularly set on. So I don't think this is a case of David just giving Jessica children. I doubt that was the motive for the infidelity. That would have been a side effect. I've been letting this go and turning a blind eye for years. It was a dark thought in the back of my mind after Emily's allergy was discovered, but I dismissed it. It got worse after the twins were born, but again, I dismissed it. When Jessica stopped having babies, I wanted to feel reassured by that, but David had gotten a vasectomy, so if anything, that made my anxiety worse. There have been nights when I wish the twins were younger, that they had come along after David's procedure. It's been twisting me into knots for a long time, but I don't want to be the one who rips our family apart, especially since technically I could be wrong. Except now I'm very afraid because in the last few months, we've had a new development in our kids' social circle. Noah, Jessica's eldest, asked Chloe out. Chloe, my eldest, she's really blossomed over these last few years and has become quite the outspoken beauty, so I'm not shocked to see she's getting male attention. But Noah asking her out completely threw me. Chloe said no, but only because I'm quite protective when it comes to her exploring dating, and she knew she'd have to ask me first. I could tell she was flattered and intrigued by his interest and wanted to say yes. She approached me to talk about it. Bless my girl, she did everything right. I think she expected I would see things her way and agree that she could date Noah. Much to her surprise, I very firmly said no. That caused a bit of conflict. She didn't even want to date him that badly. She just couldn't understand why she wasn't allowed to, and I couldn't explain it to her. All I could come up with was, he's too old for you, which he is, but it's not really about that. When Jessica and David heard, I was so curious to see what their reactions would be. If either of them had agreed with Chloe and tried to convince me that the two of them should be allowed to date, I think I would have been relieved and taken that as proof that I was wrong. Wrong about something going on between them, wrong about who fathered Jessica's children. But they took my side. Both of them put their foot down, though not as fiercely as I did. David agreed with me, but he also worried that trying to forbid such a romance would only make Chloe want it more. He's probably right about that. Jessica seemed more apathetic to the idea. She didn't want Noah to date Chloe either, and she backed me up, but I don't know, she just wasn't taking it as seriously. She seemed to think it was a fleeting crush. Well, it wasn't. In the months following those conversations, Noah has spent more and more time with Chloe. They've been alone or with other friends whenever they possibly could. It's become abundantly clear that Noah is crazy about Chloe and wants to be with her, and he definitely wants to be physical. I've been watching them like a hawk and have noticed his eye wandering many times. While I'm doing everything I can to nip this budding romance in the bud, I also feel somewhat powerless. Chloe hasn't outwardly defied me. She's still just hanging out with Noah's friends. Forcing them to stop spending time together would seem unreasonable and probably encourage more sneaking around. But I'm so afraid that they're already doing just that. My nightmare is that they're secretly dating, doing who knows what when no one is looking. I've observed Noah being rather handsy with Chloe, and she doesn't seem to object at all, and I just don't know what to say. I had considered trying to convince Chloe that Noah is like her brother. But if she doesn't see him that way, I don't really have the power to rewrite their emotional dynamic or the history of their friendship. I've always seen Jessica and her children as being like family, but my kids might see Jessica's kids more as best friends. The problem, of course, is that if I'm right, if my husband has indeed been carrying on an affair over the years and is the father of Jessica's children, then Noah and Chloe cannot be anything more than friends under any circumstances. End of discussion. It can never happen, but I feel powerless to stop it. David has apparently talked to Noah about this, as has Jessica, but he is unrelenting and won't give up on Chloe. I think she enjoys the attention and devotion. Noah has even confronted me, asking why I'm so against this when I know him well and know he would be good to Chloe. I didn't know what to say other than to fall back on her being too young for him, but that won't work forever. If, God forbid, they're still attracted to each other in a few years, they'll pursue this with abandon, and once they're legal adults, there will be nothing I can do about it. Jessica and David agree with me that Noah cannot date Chloe, but that's all they've really done. They seem to feel just as powerless as I do to prevent teen love. Sometimes it genuinely feels like they've just given up, choosing to bury their heads in the sand and hope the feelings pass as Noah and Chloe get older. Sure, they're in high school, and it's unlikely Noah will be in love with Chloe forever. But my fear is that she'll let him do something intimate with her before that time comes, something neither of them can take back. I am this close to opening a door I cannot close, this close to screaming at David that none of this would be happening if he hadn't cheated on me all these years, if he hadn't been all but raising a second family with his surrogate sister behind my back. Now David's son wants to smash our daughter, his actual sister, because as far as he knows, she's just his childhood friend, and it's all David and Jessica's fault for what they've done. If I speak up, everything gets blown to hell. On the off chance that I'm wrong, I'll be a horrible monster who accused the love of my life and one of my closest friends of doing something unforgivable. If I'm right, it still tears our entire structure apart. The family and social unit we've built over the last several years will be gone, and everyone will be stressed and upset, even if David and I don't divorce. If I do nothing, Chloe is eventually going to sleep with Noah and be his girlfriend, and I'm terrified it will happen sooner rather than later, or worse, that it's already happened under my nose. I hope to hell this relationship fades as they mature, but what if it doesn't? What if they stay together for years? What if they marry and want to have children someday? If I tell Chloe the truth about Jessica's kids, then everyone else will find out too, and it will ruin so many lives. It would shatter my kids' perception of their father and their Aunt Jessica. David is Ethan's hero. I can't even bear to think about how much this would hurt him. And what about Jessica's children? They are innocent in all of this. They didn't choose where they came from, and I don't want to hurt them. Even though I'm not happy with Noah at the moment. A week ago, I saw him put his hand on Chloe's thigh, and I wanted to knock his teeth out. He doesn't deserve the burden of knowing that the girl he's been fantasizing about is his half-sister. It's all so messed up, and I don't know what to do. I've been looking the other way, and letting my husband and his best friend insult me for such a long time. I thought I could live with it, but this situation with Noah and Chloe has me deeply distressed. Update 3 days later. First of all, wow, I did not expect my post to get as much traction as it did. I was half worried that someone in my family or social circle might find it, especially when someone alerted me that the post had been shared on Instagram. But as far as I can tell, no one in my family has seen it. I want to thank all of the kind commenters who wished me well. To those who were more frustrated with my indecision, I get it. But I was dealing with an uncertain situation, and the stakes were incredibly high. I felt like no matter what choice I made, something could and likely would go wrong. I've spent the last 5 years imagining different scenarios based on various ways I could handle this if I ever decided to act on it. To everyone who was clamoring for an update, I have one for you. I previously said that I was going to do a secret DNA test and had decided on that course of action. In the end, I couldn't go through with it, and now I regret that because the window to do so has essentially closed. It felt out of line for me to do that to another person's child behind their back. Ethically, it was dicey. I've since consulted with my lawyer, as many commenters suggested, and she advised me against it because no matter the results, it could make me look bad in a potential divorce proceeding. But I really wish I had done it anyway and just not told anyone, because I so badly need to know, and I still don't know for sure. Likewise, I wanted to tell Chloe in confidence, but the more I thought about it, even that seemed over the line. It felt wrong to plant such ideas in her mind about her father, without even talking to him first. So what I ended up doing was confronting David and Jessica. Many comments suggested this as well. I finally told both of them that we needed to have a serious talk. It felt counterproductive to approach just one of them, because I figured they would tell the other in their own words before I could properly prepare. I wanted them both to hear what I had to say. Once all the kids were at school, I laid out all of my suspicions and the reasons for them. I made it clear how much I love both of them, but that a combination of clues had led me to notice the similarities between David and Jessica's children. And I didn't even list all of them in my original post. For example, David has been a sleepwalker in the past, and so have Chloe, Noah, and Ben. I told them over and over how much they meant to me and how I didn't want to believe it, but the thought had crept into my mind in the past, how I had dismissed it before. But now with Noah and Chloe having crushes on each other, it became necessary to ask the question. So I asked if they had ever crossed the line, if David had ever been unfaithful, if there was even the slightest possibility that any of Jessica's children were his. I was just trying not to cry. They reacted exactly as I would have expected. The responses were so perfect and well-rehearsed that I genuinely can't tell if it was honest emotion or powerful gaslighting. Jessica was more upset than David, at least more outwardly upset. She was angry, offended at the accusation. David just seemed heartbroken by it. Maybe they were acting, but I don't know. Somehow they had reasonable responses to all the points I brought up, and they asked questions I didn't know how to answer. Why had I never objected to them spending alone time together before, and why did it suddenly bother me now? Do Jessica's children really resemble David that much, or are traits like hair color pretty basic to share in common? The whole family had always treated Jessica and her kids as part of our unit, and I had even commended David in the past for stepping up and being a father figure to Jessica's kids since they didn't have one. So why was I now saying it was a bad thing? What exactly did I want them to do? How could I think such a thing about them, and why had I waited so long to say something? David was more understanding than Jessica. He respected my feelings, or at least he acted like he did. Jessica, on the other hand, seemed to feel more betrayed by what I said. I ended up apologizing several times, even though I'm not sure I did anything wrong. David also apologized for anything he'd done that might have made me think he was unfaithful. When I asked Jessica more pointedly, if not David, then who had fathered her children, she snapped back that it was none of my business. I could tell she was in no mood to get personal or vulnerable with me after my accusations. I'm not proud to say that I lost my temper and said that after everything we had done for her and her children, such information wasn't a lot to ask. Perhaps she owed it to us. I regretted the words as soon as I said them. Jessica shouted back that I had never done anything for her, that it was David and his parents who had kept her afloat all these years, not me. She launched into a longer tirade, accusing me of always acting superior to her. I don't believe I did that, though it's possible I unintentionally gave off that vibe. David did his best to calm her down, but the tension in the room was undeniable. I don't know, I just don't know. It's driving me to the edge of madness. There's a way to be certain, of course. Not certain of my husband's fidelity, but of the paternity of Jessica's children. So I asked David for my own peace of mind, for the sake of our daughter, Chloe, and for our family unit, if he could please get a DNA test done, a paternity test. I went on to explain that I knew he disliked and distrusted such things, but I really needed this. I could see the pain in David's eyes. Maybe it was an act, but he seemed genuinely hurt that I was asking for this, that his word that he had always been faithful wasn't enough for me. But very reluctantly, he agreed to participate in a DNA test. Unfortunately, Jessica did not agree, and that's where we hit a roadblock. I was afraid of this. Jessica was infuriated at the entire concept, and told me in no uncertain terms that I would not be getting samples of her children's DNA. She basically told me to go F myself for even asking. I pressed David, but honestly, he was a bit useless in this situation, though probably right. He tried to convince Jessica, but she wouldn't hear of it. When I pushed him for further support, he kind of shrugged, saying he couldn't force her to get the test done, and he's right. If she refuses, that's really a dead end. I've looked into it quite a bit, and even consulted my lawyer. There's no way to proceed without Jessica's cooperation. The problem is, David could in theory petition the court to demand a paternity test for Noah and the others. The issue is that to do this, he'd essentially be admitting that he slept with Jessica and believes her children could be his. That would be the version of events he'd have to maintain. But David has staunchly insisted that nothing ever happened with Jessica, that he never cheated on me. Whether or not he's being honest about this is another story, but he'd have to go on record making a claim that he isn't prepared to make. He is certain the children aren't his, and has no intention of fighting for custody of them. So even though a legal route exists, David won't pursue it because it would contradict his insistence on being faithful. So no judge is going to compel Jessica to submit DNA samples from her children. Noah is also old enough that his consent would be required, and if both he and Jessica refuse to participate, it's unlikely David would have a case. He'd have to target one of Jessica's younger children, like one of the twins, but he doesn't want to do that. He's unwilling to take his best friend to court to prove something that, in his words, he already knows isn't true. David is asking me to please let this go and trust him because pursuing it further will fracture everything. And according to my lawyer, it's not realistic anyway. For David to establish paternity, he would have to admit to an affair in the first place, and he's not willing to do that. If he did, that alone would be all the proof I needed to confirm my suspicions, even if I would need more for a court case. I pressed David further about Noah and Chloe, insisting that I didn't want them dating. David agreed, and apparently Jessica still agrees. David plans to have a serious talk with Noah and go into protective Papa Bear mode. Among other things, he's going to remind Noah that once he turns 18 in a couple of months, being intimate with Chloe will literally be a crime. I wouldn't actually press charges, as I know Noah wouldn't do anything against Chloe's will, but I'm not above implying the threat, and thankfully David isn't either. I did ask David if he'd be open to potentially swiping a sample of Noah's DNA for a private paternity test, but he was very hesitant. Like me, he views it as unethical. He also pointed out that if we did this and Jessica found out, it would likely mean the end of our friendship with her. David believes that things are still in a salvageable state where Jessica and I could reconcile and become friends again, and I can see how much he wants that to happen. But if I did a DNA test on Noah behind Jessica's back and she found out, she would likely hit the roof. And honestly, I wouldn't entirely blame her, though I'd be very interested to see the results. David ended up going to see Jessica and spending the night. I know you're probably cringing and throwing up your hands, and trust me, I wasn't happy about it either. That was a very long conversation, but he was adamant that he needed to perform damage control. So they spent the night together, with David insisting that nothing happened. I didn't sleep a wink and kept texting him for updates. From what I can gather, Jessica will cool off, but she needs some time. When David and I talked things over the next morning, it was an emotionally fulfilling conversation. We ended up agreeing to take the kids, our kids, not Jessica's, to visit their grandparents for a few days. It was an impromptu visit, but we've done it before, and they were delighted to have us. I really just wanted our family to spend some time together away from Jessica's side of the family, so to speak. I always love seeing my in-laws. I refer to them as Robert, 75M, and Susan, 67F. I know Reddit is famous for stories about the mother-in-law from hell, but in my life, that couldn't be further from the truth. I feel safe with them to the point that when they noticed how distant David and I seemed from each other, I finally relented and confessed my fears. I told them about my anxiety, that I suspected Jessica and David might be having an affair and that Jessica's children could be his. Here's where things got a little interesting. When I told them what I was feeling, Susan gave Robert this pointed look and let out a big, dramatic sigh. It turns out Susan has had similar misgivings to mine over the years. She's genuinely suspected that David and Jessica were closer than they'd ever admit, and that they may have crossed the line in the past. Robert, on the other hand, refuses to even entertain the idea. He's always insisted that Susan is seeing things that aren't there, maintaining that David and Jessica are like siblings and would never do such a thing. Susan thinks his stance is naive, pointing out that even though she and Robert had taken Jessica in and loved her like a daughter, that doesn't mean David viewed her as a sister or that Jessica viewed him as a brother. Robert continued to insist that David and Jessica have always been like siblings, and I could tell he and Susan had already had this conversation before. They kept going in circles, with Susan getting exasperated. She pointed out that surrogate siblings or not, David and Jessica aren't actually brother and sister, so nothing would have stopped them from being physical together if they felt mutual attraction. At that point, Robert just sighed and walked away from the conversation. It became clear that Susan has privately wondered for years whether Jessica's children might have been fathered by David. This is part of why she has always treated them as her grandchildren. To be clear, I never minded that. I also don't fault Susan for not voicing these concerns to me sooner. She had no proof, and she saw far less of David and Jessica's closeness in our adult lives than I did. As for the kids, they're doing all right. I don't know what Jessica told her children, but the general consensus, the official version of events, is that Jessica and I had a fight and need a break from each other. That's what David and I told our children when they pressed for more details. David defended me and shut down further questions, saying it wasn't their business. I'm not sure if Jessica stuck to that version, but our children and hers still have each other's phone numbers and social media, so they've presumably been in contact over the last couple of days. I suspect my kids have kept Jessica's kids in the loop with any updates, and if Jessica had told them anything significant, they probably would have relayed that information to my children. It's clear that Chloe and Noah are still very close. I did try to talk to Chloe about it more, but the timing was off. She rejected my counsel and interpreted my reinforced reluctance as being related to my fight with Jessica. Chloe insisted she wasn't dating Noah, though I'm not entirely sure if that's true, but she made it clear that she was going to remain close friends with him. While she's not usually a disobedient child, she put her foot down on this one. To be fair, I can't really justify separating them or forbidding their friendship. They've known each other for years. David agrees with me on not allowing them to date, but he doesn't support the idea of preventing them from hanging out altogether. I wish I had a more definitive update. If anything significant happens in the next few days, I'll let you all know. I'm mostly just kicking myself for not going through with the secret DNA test, even just for my own peace of mind. Now I feel like I've lost the only opportunity to get definitive proof, one way or the other. Second update, 1 day later. I didn't expect to have another update so soon, but after posting my last one, I did a lot of thinking about my kids. I ultimately decided that whatever else happened, I needed to warn Chloe about the situation and do so immediately. To hell with what it meant for David or the fallout with the other kids. Chloe needed to be aware of what she might be getting herself into. So I discreetly kept Chloe out of school last night. We went back home, and this morning I dropped everyone else off but saved Chloe for last. Instead of taking her to school, I drove past it and told her we needed to talk. That's always a frightening thing for a teenager to hear from a parent, but I quickly reassured her that she wasn't in trouble. I explained she needed to know the truth about why Jessica and I were fighting, and why her dating Noah was out of the question. I very gently told her that because of David's closeness to Jessica and the striking resemblance Noah bears to him, I had come to suspect that David and Jessica may have been intimate at some point. I explained that if there was any chance Noah's father was actually David, then her dating him would be a significant problem. Chloe was quiet during all of this, and even after I had stopped talking to let her respond, she paused for quite a while before she finally said that we needed to get Noah and discuss this with him as well. I had no objections, so she texted him to meet with us. They're both skipping school today, but Chloe gets straight A's and this is extremely important, so I looked the other way. Noah came to meet us, and Chloe had me relay what I had told her to him as well. I apologized to him for any indication I might have given that I didn't think he was good enough for my daughter, and to both of them for not telling the truth sooner. Noah and Chloe just gave each other this oddly knowing stare, and that's when they blew my mind. Chloe spoke first, with Noah backing her up. They revealed to me that in fact, they had already known about David and Jessica, or at least they had strongly suspected. Apparently, Noah had overheard conversations that were quite questionable, as well as the sounds of intimacy from Jessica's room, sounds he would rather forget. But all signs pointed to Jessica's lover being David. Noah had wondered for a very long time, and back in January, he finally voiced his fears to Chloe. She agreed with him. She had also noticed a strange sort of closeness between her father and his mother. They agreed that David was likely having an affair. They also agreed that because of Emily's allergy, David might very well be her father, and if Emily was David's daughter, the rest of Noah's siblings could be David's as well. Noah could be David's kid himself. The math led them to the same conclusions as mine. So Chloe and Noah came up with a little plan. As it turns out, they are not in love, they never were. They're still just best friends, but they had the same instinct as me. They didn't want to blow up our entire family and social circle without more direct evidence, which Noah has been working on acquiring. Though Chloe very much wanted to tell me the truth, she was hesitant because she knew it would shatter me. She had no idea I was already suffering in silence. Chloe apologized for not voicing her suspicions sooner. Honestly, we both cried, and I made sure she understood that none of this was her fault and that I loved her very much. So the bottom line is Chloe and Noah already know they could be half-siblings and aren't actually interested in being a couple. That was their idea for how to rock the boat, to force David and Jessica to do something about the situation rather than just keep making a fool of me. I also think it was Noah and Chloe's way of punishing them for their affair. Teenagers can be vindictive, so they concocted this idea that they wanted to date. Every flirtation and every inappropriate touch I witnessed was apparently all staged, and for the benefit of David, Jessica, or both. This was supposed to make them sweat, and Chloe and Noah expected they would jump out of their seats to forbid it from happening. When I was the one who did instead, it kind of threw the kids for a loop. They couldn't understand why I cared more than the actual cheaters. They began to suspect that maybe I knew. Noah confronting me that one time about, why can't I date Chloe, was him trying to gauge if I knew or not. Maybe I shouldn't be surprised. Chloe and Noah have always been close friends and confided in each other. Maybe I should be a little more concerned about how sneaky they've been, but honestly, I'm just so relieved they're not dating. Sure, they could be lying to throw off the scent, I guess, but they already knew they're likely related and didn't even blink when I told them. We even had a bit of a laugh together when Noah mentioned how he had been a little offended that I was so against him dating my daughter. Before, I kind of jokingly asked him, "So you don't think she's gorgeous?" And Noah, bless his heart, shrugged it off, saying, She is, but so is my English teacher, and I'm not asking her out either. Either way, the question now is where to go from here. We have to figure that out. I will say it's such a relief to have told Chloe, and I feel like an elephant has taken one of its feet off my chest. Having her in my corner, and Noah in my corner, as well means a lot to me. Even though I've basically just had it confirmed that David is sleeping with Jessica, I kind of already knew that anyway. So now it's just a question of how to proceed. Noah has already volunteered to submit his DNA so I can compare it to David's, and both he and Chloe advised me not to tell David and Jessica when I do this, which I agree with. They're both completely on my side, which means more to me than I can ever express to them. Noah has also been trying to set up a camera in Jessica's room to catch her, and David in the act. Chloe told me flat out that I needed to divorce her dad, and hearing that from my own daughter made it clearer than it's ever been. She's right. Third update, 2 days later. First, a few points to address from the comments. I don't have any DNA test results back yet. That can take weeks. But now that I know Chloe is in no danger of dating a relative, the pressure is off. I'll get into this momentarily, but it frankly no longer matters if David fathered the children. I highly, highly doubt my father-in-law is having an affair with Jessica. At worst, he might know or even just suspect the truth about Jessica and David, but it's also possible that he just refuses to believe they would do such a thing. I've been vague about details for privacy, but to put it very simply, Robert and Jessica are both pretty white. Susan and David are not. Had Robert fathered Jessica's babies, they would look different than they do. Nevertheless, I do have an update. First things first, I discussed this in the comments, but our little team has supposedly recruited my mother-in-law. I say supposedly because Chloe and Noah were going to talk to her about getting help with submitting the DNA test. And at the advice of my lawyer, Olivia, I am staying out of the process officially. I told Chloe not to do it, and she said she wouldn't. My mother-in-law hasn't contacted me about it either, though we have been in touch. I'll get into that more in a moment. The bottom line is that I can honestly say I had no knowledge of any DNA test. Another bit of good news. I was digging through the paperwork in preparation for my divorce, wanting to get a head start against David, and one thing that came to my attention is that my name is on the paperwork for our home. David's name is not. I was the one who bought the house, and we always planned to add David onto the paperwork at some point, but we never got around to it, and eventually the idea was forgotten. It was my lawyer, Olivia, who pointed this out to me, and it felt like finding a winning lottery ticket on the ground. I don't know where I'd be without Olivia. She's a dear friend from university who I reached out to, head in hand, for help. She's been there for me this past week, not just as legal counsel, but as the friend I really needed right now. The thing is, she's not our lawyer, mine and David's. We have our own family attorney, who has helped us out of jams in the past. We clashed with our HOA a few years ago, not worth getting into right now. But Olivia is a lawyer who specializes in family law and has handled divorces before. David remembers her from university and knows she went into law, but doesn't know she's a divorce attorney. So I can have her over for coffee like we're just catching up, and he has no idea anything is going on. Turns out he's not the only one who can hide someone under his spouse's nose, under the guise of being a friend. So on to the update. The last time I looked at David's phone was 3 months ago, around the time Chloe and Noah began claiming they wanted to date. I found nothing. While I know how to search for recently deleted photos and didn't see any, my comments taught me how to find recently deleted messages. So when David was asleep, I did just that. I swiped his phone, brought it downstairs, and checked the recently deleted messages. I'm glad I did, but I also wish I hadn't because I'm still reeling from the pain. Sure enough, a conversation with Jessica had been deleted. Recent texts discussed the conflict between her and me, with Jessica describing me as a problem, and David trying to pacify her without defending me at all. To be clear, they both alluded to how they had expected this for a while and just hoped it would never happen, presumably me accusing them of having an affair. While the whole conversation and the fact that it was deleted was sketchy, nothing was outright admitted. So I scrolled a bit higher to a few days before the fight. Jessica's messages became a bit more flirty. Then I saw it. 5 days before I confronted them, Jessica had sent David a selfie wearing nothing. Guys, I teared up. I knew it was true. I knew it in my bones, but seeing the proof still cut me like a hot knife. I exited the Messages app and checked David's recently deleted photos. Sure enough, the same selfie was there, along with others of Jessica in various poses to show off. There were pictures of the two of them together, cuddled and pressed close like a couple. In some of these, she wasn't wearing anything. In some, they both weren't. There were videos. Jessica sent David a video message of herself in her birthday suit, and I had to actually hear her voice talking to him in a tone that made me sick about how she was sending him a quick video to help him get through the day. In more than one video, she called him her boo, and hearing her call him that, I almost vomited. I stopped looking at that point. I'd seen enough for about 5 minutes anyway. Then a strange compulsion to keep searching led me to check David's laptop. I knew enough of his passcodes to access his iCloud storage, and yeah, basically more of the same. There were letters, long letters between them. I didn't have the heart to read past the first few lines of one of them, but I did read David mention our children. There were countless images of Jessica, selfies of them together, videos where Jessica appeared to be touching herself, and there were even smash tapes of the two of them. Noah had previously offered to try and hide a camera in Jessica's room, but hell, he never needed to. David was hiding a whole treasure trove under my nose all along. I scrolled and scrolled. There were so many going back years. Not all of it was dirty. There were some photos of Jessica's kids too. One video was of Emily and the twins playing together when they were younger, with David and Jessica's voices behind the camera. There were even old pictures of David and Jessica from when they were younger, I'd even say teenagers. I snapped. All these years I had been telling myself I had to be wrong, that it couldn't be true. Well, it was true. I know no one forced me to look at as much of the evidence as I did, but I'm still hurting very badly from having seen it, and in that moment, I wanted to act. So I did. I called Olivia, my lawyer. It was the middle of the night, so I had to call her twice, but she picked up. Though I had woken her, when I asked her to come by and said it was an emergency, she agreed. I also asked her to draw the paperwork and have it ready. She told me she'd already had it prepared since I first reached out to her. As I waited for her, I went through the necessary channels on David's laptop to make sure he wouldn't be able to remotely disconnect our access to his little stash, changing passwords and all that. Olivia arrived, and I went outside to greet her. In the car, I spent a good half hour in the passenger seat just crying, and she was great about that. Afterward, I passed her David's phone and laptop with all the information she needed to use them. She warned me that this could be considered theft, so I asked her to forward and print out copies of everything she could and then bring the items back, because I just couldn't bear to do it myself. She agreed. I went back inside and then packed up David's things while the house slept. At one point, Ethan got up to use the bathroom and asked me what I was doing, but I told him I was just cleaning. David stirred once or twice while I was in the bedroom but didn't wake. I got most of his things packed into trash bags and loaded up the car. That's when I woke him up and told him to come outside. He was confused and half asleep, but he did notice things were missing. I ignored his questions and just told him to come with me. So he followed me outside. Once we were by the car, I pulled out the divorce papers and officially handed them to him. That was when he figured out what I was doing, and he tried to talk me out of it. He tried to be sweet with me, to be tender. He kept insisting that he loved me, that there had never been anything with Jessica, continually trying to persuade me not to tear our family apart. Even 2 weeks ago, I might have wilted under him because the manipulation and gaslighting were truly master class, but I can see through it now. I didn't tell him that I knew he was full of it. I didn't tell him what I had seen. I just told him we were finished. He tried a different approach. He refused to go, firmly stating that our children were his too, and that even if we were separating, I had no right to just decide the kids would stay with me over him. This was when I very coldly presented the paperwork, reminding him that the house is in my name, and told him under no circumstances would my kids be staying with Jessica. He argued for a while longer, but in the end, he decided to be the bigger person and keep the peace. At that moment, I didn't care where he went. Before he left, he did ask about his phone and laptop, and I waved him off by saying they were in one of the bags. I couldn't sleep for the rest of that night. I cried more. Eventually, I realized I'd have to wake my children up early and explain as much as I could. Naturally, I woke Chloe first. I told her that I had kicked her father out and discovered evidence of an affair on his devices. I didn't specify what kind of evidence, and she didn't ask. I then woke up the others and gently told them that their dad had gone to stay somewhere else for a while. I wasn't sure where, but from now on, things were going to be different. Hannah was the one to ask if we were getting divorced, and I couldn't lie to her. I told her yes. Ethan asked when they could see their father again, and I wanted to cry. Chloe was a big help, urging her siblings to be sympathetic to me right now and worry about Dad later. I knew better than to poison them against their father. Olivia had warned me about that as well, so I only told Chloe that the affair was confirmed, as she had already been in the know. However, as the kids were getting ready for school, Ethan approached me and asked point blank if it was about Jessica, and if David was going to be with her instead of me. I couldn't answer, but I suppose that was an answer on its own. I got the kids to school, and my next step was calling to have the locks changed. I knew David would be back for his devices before long, but thankfully, Olivia returned with them before he showed up again. It was a very quick visit. She just told me that everything was accomplished, and that she had records of everything we would need in court. Sure enough, David turned up an hour later, demanding to know where his laptop and phone were. I had set them back in our bedroom like they had never moved, and I just told him he had forgotten them. He insisted that I had said they were in one of the bags, so I shrugged him off and told him I must have been mistaken. After he grabbed them, he tried again to reason with me, but I just showed him the door. I knew the kids would start coming home from school soon, and I think he was trying to delay leaving so he could see them. I wasn't having it. I started shouting again and sent him on his way. I'm still in absolute pain and despair over what I saw. I don't know if he'll realize that anyone went through his devices and made copies of the evidence, or if he suspects I saw anything, but he didn't say so. After he left, I cried once again. I talked to my mother-in-law that night. Apparently, David did show up at his parents' house, which surprised me since I was so certain he'd stay with Jessica. But maybe Jessica knows how suspicious that would look to the children and doesn't want to rock the boat too much. Maybe he knows I'm more likely to let my children see their grandmother than Jessica at this point, and he wants to see them to give his version of events. That is not happening. Susan already shared the version of events David told her and Robert. He claims I'm having some kind of mental breakdown, that he wishes he could help me, but my paranoia is causing me to lash out and turn violent. I was never violent. I shoved him away when he tried to hold me, that's all. What's so hilarious is that he didn't mention Jessica at all to his parents. He didn't even frame it as me falsely believing he was having an affair, even though that's his story when talking to me. He left Jessica out of it entirely when talking to his parents. Susan noticed that. She believes me. Robert doesn't know what to believe anymore. According to Susan, he seemed very troubled by what he heard from all sides. As for Jessica, she's been radio silent. Noah has told Chloe that she's acting like nothing is wrong, but is clearly stressed out. When her children ask, she makes similar claims that I'm having some kind of emotional or nervous breakdown and pushing her and David away. She doesn't mention anything about my accusing them of an affair, but still puts it all on me. Jessica hasn't reached out to talk to me directly, and I haven't tried talking to her since our big argument. I haven't told my kids much, just that I'm having disagreements with David and Jessica, though I made it very clear it's not a question of my mental health. Honestly, I think they all kind of know what's going on. Chloe continues to be my rock, as I try to be for her and the others, and Noah continues to be our spy in the ranks. Right now, my biggest regret is the stress this is causing the children, which I knew it would, but it still needed to be done. My life has fallen apart, but it was never my life. Fourth update, 6 days later. Hey guys, it's been a rough week. A lot has happened. I don't really want to talk about all of it in detail, so I'm going to keep this short. I know I never shut up, it's just how I am, but I'm going to be much more brief this time around. David has a lawyer now. I don't know him, but he met with Mark and Olivia. To everyone saying I should have Jessica arrested, I probably could have if I had shown the police the video. Instead, I just sent it to my lawyer. Maybe this makes me foolish, But even now, I think part of me is still trying to protect people I once loved and go easy on them. But everything's been on hold for the past few days because Robert had a heart attack. I saw David, and I saw Jessica and Jessica's kids at the funeral. It was the first time we were all together since before all this happened. Nobody talked about what's going on, short of Jessica briefly apologizing for what happened before. She did seem sincere, I'll give her that, but I wasn't about to call her out anyway. Jessica, David, and Susan all seemed pretty devastated. I was too, but we all agreed not to argue or talk about the divorce, and to just let the day be a ceasefire to focus on Robert. David and I had a nice conversation about him. I've been spending time with my kids and taking a couple of days off work. I have enough on the back burner. David also saw the kids twice before and after the funeral with me present. It went well. At my direction and Chloe's, they didn't mention Jessica, and David didn't try anything funny with any of them. I think he does miss them and hate that he can't see them thanks to all this. The kids are also pretty upset about losing Grandpa on top of not being able to see Dad as much as before. I don't think any of them blame me, but that's far from the point. Frankly, Liam slept in my bed the last 3 nights. I'll get more into this in the future when I have the energy to talk about what's going on in more detail. But whoever suggested that Susan lied about the test results was correct. She never sent them in. She confessed as much to me. I guess she didn't feel comfortable going behind her son's back, but she felt comfortable lying to me to protect him until she didn't, until she felt guilty and she came clean. Under the circumstances, I'm not angry with her, but I know better than to trust her anymore. As far as I know, she did not tell David about the test, but it means Noah could still be David's son. Probably is. My lawyers finished going through David and Jessica's letters with a fine-tooth comb. The bottom line is they definitely found what it was that Jessica didn't want me to see, and I now completely understand why she was so panicked. It has to do with why Jessica and David didn't marry conventionally. They did something very bad, but this is genuinely something that I'm not sure I should be talking about, even on an anonymous internet post. I haven't even been able to collect my feelings about what Jessica and David have done, especially with everything else going on, so I don't know if I should be more explicit. I'm sorry, I know that's not what anyone wanted to hear, but please try to understand. Olivia agreed with me that when in doubt, don't post it. I've told my lawyers to put a pin in it for now because I'm in no fit state to figure out how to proceed with it, or if I should use it against them. I'm just feeling like crap. Honestly, it's difficult not to blame myself for Robert. I can only imagine David and Jessica are blaming themselves too. I know they're bad people. I don't forgive them, but this tore them apart as it did me. And I think all 3 of us feel like the divorce stressed Robert out to the point where it may have contributed. He already had heart disease, and in particular, I blame myself for showing him what I showed him. I showed him proof of the affair shortly before he died. I'll be carrying that with me for a very long time, even if I shouldn't. I'll update again whenever I do. I'm sorry,